Fearscape Media Network, exploring the unknown, one podcast at a time.
Hi, friends. This is Kelly with Wishful Drinking and Binge Thinking, the podcast where I get just absolutely hammered and I dole out psychological advice. That's right, I am going to be more drunk than that girl you met in the bar bathroom after your karaoke set who said, "You have such good stage presence. Oh my god." That's right, zero preparation, multiple drinks, countless profound gems. Tune in the last Monday of every month on Fearscape Media Network.
Ghosts in the Attics, Bodies in the Basements may contain graphic, violent, vulgar, or explicit content not suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to another episode of Ghosts in the Attics, Bodies in the Basement, listeners. I'm Anna.
I'm Lindsey, and I feel like I say this a lot lately, but it's a special episode today.
It's always special when you get to hear our awesome voices.
And you get to come into Rosewood Manor. We always forget to go with the shtick that we're a house.
Yeah, like Lindsey's sister Laura created this fucking magnificently
Badass
beautiful,
logo.
badass logo for us. And we started something and then we fell off. Hey,
We're
welcome
like,
to ADD life.
We're in a manor. Let's go up to the attic. Let's go in the basement. And then we're just like, hey, what's up?
Well, today we're going to the kitchen table because, fun fact, it's my birthday episode. Woo woo! Actually, when it comes out, it will not be my birthday. Sorry about you.
Close enough where this is called birthday episode.
It's going to come out Friday, January 21st. However, my birthday is January 24th, and I feel like that's fucking close enough to make this my birthday episode.
Yep.
And unlike me, Lindsey is not driving up to surprise me, but she has excellent things planned for my birthday in her own right, so I'm really jazzed to be able to shout that from the fucking rooftops eventually.
I mean, let's be real. I'll never be able to top you surprising me for my birthday.
No, and your granny getting all kinds of sideways about you saying the word fuck. Hope you don't listen, Granny. Love you. We don't cuss out of for fun. We cuss because it's our second language.
It's a sign of high intelligence, allegedly.
It allegedly is, which is fun.
It's funny. You mentioned my granny, and you're like, hope you don't listen. My memo liked our Facebook page yesterday, which is my other side of the family.
Yeah, your
so
mom's
hi,
mom.
Granny and Memo. If
hi.
Both of you are listening, we do have listeners in that age category.
We do, and anybody that's listening at all, fucking thank you because
seriously.
Heyo. So thank you for listening. Anyone who listens to us, we really, truly appreciate it. By the way, we'd like some feedback. You know our Gmail, gabbpodcast@gmail.com. We expect something so we can connect with you because we desperately want friends. Not desperately, that sounds bad, but desperately want friends.
Actually, I have a really funny story. You know how we're always like, who's listening to us? Who are these people?
Where are you, Germany? Where'd you come from? Hi.
Turkey. Ukraine.
Right? Chile. Hello.
I actually found out that one of my old friends who I'm Facebook friends with is one of our listeners.
Yay!
And it was so funny because she had said something about hating her voice.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, that's okay. I hate my voice too. She goes, it's so funny to me you hate your voice and you started a podcast. And I was like, first of all, you listen to my podcast?
Aww.
Second of all, correction, Anna decided we should do a podcast. She
Yes.
just convinced me to join it, but it's like an amazing thing. I love being
I
here.
also backhandedly told her she needed to write more and get on it, and that's how Lost in Gray became a novel, because we both like bitched each other out into writing more, and then we wrote a book together.
And we were like, hey, these stories are very similar.
They were. It was
Together.
kind of fun. If you are interested in a lighthearted, spooky, creepy read, Lost in
Lighthearted,
Gray.
right?
I'm trying to not overtell, Lindsay.
Telling people it's lighthearted when the cover's a bloody child's shoe.
And a bicycle. Listen, it comes out within the first few chapters. A child dies. We're horrible.
It's
We
the cover of the
acknowledge that.
book. It's not a spoiler.
It's not. All the twists and turns and creepy shit, that's where it's at. But
Anyways.
I think back about Lost in Gray and I'm like, oh my God, that was like 5 years ago. How the fuck was that like 5 years ago? 4, 5? I don't know. It's been
2017. No. 2016.
No, I don't know. Look, listen, I'm not on Amazon right now, but
Let's go on Amazon.
It's been a smooth minute, and that blows my mind. Since then, me and Lindsay have put out another book together, which we strongly suggest anybody who supports mental illness check out. It's called Uncharted Waters. It has to do with a child's suicide. If you're not here for that, we support you. If you are here for that, if you've experienced that, we also feel for you deep-heartedly, know what that's like, me especially.
I just had the weirdest mindfuck moment.
Oh yeah?
It's on topic. I did get on Amazon and I looked up Lost in Gray. It was
our book
2017.
prices fucked up again?
No, but hear this out. As you're saying this about Uncharted Waters, there is now a new book that shows up on Amazon called Lost in Gray that was released in 2018. And I was like, the fuck?
Is it by a certain someone that we don't speak about, like Voldemort?
No. But
okay.
It says mental health is still something a lot of people struggle with and blah, 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 blah. So it's like...
Okay, now we have to fucking read that.
It's like, so...
Are they
our
lost
title
in the...
for one book...
Is it lost in the gray matter of your brain? Ooh, that's intriguing. Now I gotta buy it. Probably on Audible. Shout out, sponsor us, because it's all I can fucking focus on nowadays is Audible books. Right. Shout out to Kim at Mainstream Boutique. I still haven't listened to the book you bought me for Christmas or read the physical copy you gave me. Love you deeply. I'm gonna try to get it done by Friday.
So it turns out this book is about depression, specifically like postpartum depression, and following the story. It sounds like a great story, an important story. It's talking about wanting to end the stigma around depression, but like maybe
Absolutely.
Google your title next time.
Yeah, is it spelled the exact same way?
Spelled the exact same way, Grey.
Nice. All right.
I mean, it's probably an amazing book. I don't know. No, it's nothing against this author. Right. I was just shocked to see that.
The fact that we Googled our asses off before we launched a podcast, created
we Google before we do anything,
made a book together, made a second book together, made our own on our own project books by themselves. Like,
I just remembered the other day that
Google's
I wrote Exercising My Mind.
Yeah, you did. It's a great book.
I just remembered that the other day. I was like, oh,
no,
I put out a book.
It's so funny because Paranormalish, Lindsay's first collection, falls off frequently from the bookshelf in my room. I swear my room is haunted. Thanks you, Jillian. And
she wants to read my stuff. She misses.
I know she misses you. I miss her too. But like, it knocks that one specific book into the floor about 8 times a week, and I'm fucking over it. Ugh.
Knock your shit off, Bill.
Right.
I know you can hear me.
My closet light flickers, and we changed the bulbs. And guess what? It never did this prior to her passing with the lights like strobing like you're at a nightclub. It does it all the time now. We changed the bulbs. Same thing. We went from LED to regular bulbs. Same thing. I don't give a fuck. It's not the wiring. It's my kid. I mean,
we're a paranormal podcast, so if anybody doesn't believe that, what are you even doing here?
Oh, maybe it's for the true crimes. Yeah, we are a paranormal true crime podcast, but we have other varied interests in life, like writing and shit talking slash
Creating.
venting, whatever. We also really enjoyed this fabulous podcast by two wonderful individuals called
You've
Fairy Tale Fix.
probably heard us mention it like 100 times the last several episodes.
I mean, yeah, because we're obsessed. Rightfully so. And if you have any platform to listen to a podcast on, which clearly you do because you're listening to us, go check out Fairy Tale Fix. Lindsay, would you give us our handles?
Yes, they are Fairy Tale Fix Pod on all socials, and they are very active on Instagram. Just a sidebar, if that's your thing. And their website is fantasticworlds.com/fairy-tale-fix-podcast. That will be in the show notes because I know that was a mouthful.
Yes,
All of their information will be in the show notes because we love them and we consider them our friends.
they are so fantastic, like phenomenal. The fact that we made friends that also like varied interests that we enjoy and some of the things that we cover on our show, it's a great mashup.
It's
Um,
also such a fun coincidence that they are also best friends. There is one blonde, one brunette. They've known each other
yep.
for years. Like it's all these like fun little
They
parallels with our podcast.
they don't live in the same area.
They're long
Like
distance.
they're unfortunately long distance. It's so crazy. Like
So it's
in
a perfect match.
I mean, they have very calm, soothing voices, unlike
Yes,
I'm
they have
sure
like
mine.
perfect podcast voices.
They're like,
Meanwhile, I'm like, I apologize that you have to put up with this to hear the words I say.
no shit. You know what's funny is when I hear the voice inside my head, it sounds like way more baritoned. But when I speak and I hear it on the podcast, it's way more high pitched and like, oh my God, I'm a cheerleader. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa,
I
whoa.
sound like, what now?
Nothing against cheerleaders, but I've never ever tried out to be one. So the fuck?
Needs to be a cheerleader.
Did you? That's adorable. I could
And then
see
I
you.
broke my wrist tripping at cheerleader.
Your daughter breaks her wrist from tripping. I feel that's genetic at this point.
Twice. She's done it twice.
No, she did it once, and then the next
No,
time
the second
shit
time
got
she
wild
got
at church.
pushed. It was
The
an
second
accident, but
it
yeah.
was an accident at church, but shit got wild at aftercare. Like woo! But I digress.
Mine broke because they held practice in an auditorium with that there's an auditorium at school, but
Yeah.
real thin carpet that's just over top
Yeah.
of concrete. Why
Of
were we
course,
practicing in there?
with no padding underneath, I'm
No.
sure.
Right. So, like, I don't know why we practiced in there. My family makes fun of me. They're like, you broke your wrist tripping.
It's like, listen,
And
I
I'm
trip
like,
a lot
look,
about a lot of shit.
maybe we should take it up with the school who decided that was a safe spot for me to have cheerleading practice.
Right.
I digress.
We have a lot of things we could complain about, like my insurance claim for my car. Ugh. Anyway, life is fun. It's a soap opera I didn't audition for and I don't want to be a part of. Although I enjoyed the Real Housewives of whatever the fuck. Like you pick a season, I probably watched it. I don't want to be a part of this lifestyle. I just want to have my life back.
I feel that.
Especially my car. I miss my car. It was pretty. And the truck I'm borrowing from the rental place is expensive to put gas in that bitch. Like, whoa.
Yep.
So yeah. But hey Marlena, hey Eric, if you're listening. I don't know that you listen, but hey anyway.
Apparently a lot more people that we know listen than we know.
I don't feel like anybody gives a shit about what I have to say after they see me in person because I'm so obnoxious. Love you anyway. But it's true. I'm a lot of a person. I have a lot of disorders, one of them being ADD. And that's all that needs to be said about that. Like
Speaking of ADD, you know that we're a podcast.
We are a podcast. But I wanted to give a quick shout out to Marlena and Eric for in the future taking me and Alan out this coming weekend for my birthday. It's very thoughtful and I'm very excited to participate in that. And on my actual birthday, me and Marlena are going to Pawhuska, Oklahoma to go see the Pioneer Women's Business. And I'm super fucking excited. I'm so excited.
Jealous. Like, I know I have plans on that day.
I'm trying. Well, fun fact, part of your plans or my plans is going to be like in a car on Zoom. So I've made it aware to Marlena that like I have shit going on, but like it shouldn't take very long. But it's also very important announcement to be made
Yes,
very,
we'll do
very
that
soon.
later.
But it's a tidbit that you can just look forward to because it's so fucking exciting for so many reasons. But beyond that, we are going to the Pioneer Women's Mercantile or
Mercantile? I always thought it was
Mercantile.
mercantile.
I don't fucking know. Oklahoma people like to pronounce shit stupid. Have you ever listened to me talk, people? Beyond that, then we're gonna go to her restaurant and try not to spend our entire paychecks and come home.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. So thank you to Marlena and Eric for being such great friends. And actually, fun fact, random, this is mine and Marlena's 20-year anniversary of being friends.
Wow.
Come June, maybe July, whenever the youth rodeo comes into town, that's like when we first met.
Okay, so what are the chances that you're all 20 and it's our 10?
And it's our 10. Yeah, exactly.
Around the same month and everything.
Yep, it's quite amazing how I meet excellent people. Oh, and shout out to Miss Kristen because we have been friends for, according to Facebook, 4 years, but it feels like a lifetime. To my sister from
best.
a better mister, I love you and thank you for listening and supporting me in all the ways you do. And with that being said, I think that takes care of all of our housekeeping. So,
like I said, we are True Crime Paranormal Podcast.
And true crime related. Did you know my birthday is special? Not because it's me. That's not why it's special.
Wait,
Ted
it is.
Bundy makes my birthday a little more interesting.
Awesome.
To be exact, Ted Bundy was executed on January 24th of 1989 at 7 a.m. He was pronounced dead at 7:16 a.m. by Old Sparky, which is a weird name to name an electric chair, but go you.
I thought it was like The Witness.
Right? Like, that would be hilarious.
Like, who signed it?
I was born January 24th of 1989 at 9:29 p.m. So any of you astrology-based people that know shit about witchcraft and, like, moon signs and, like, all the shit, send me my chart. I don't know how to figure this shit out.
Blake, do you listen?
Blake, hey boy,
You might know that stuff.
Yes, please.
Somebody
let a
else.
bitch know, because like I can't figure it out. I'm so ADD that I can't focus on more than like one chart at a time. So putting like 6 together to make a compilation of like my birth astrology shit
It would be very interesting.
It would be cool to know. It just
see
stresses me out.
Especially in comparison. I don't know enough about astrology to know if death matters for like anything, but imagine like comparing it to Ted Bundy's like that. Also, can I just say kudos? I guess to the state of Florida. I was going to say to him, but I guess to the state of Florida for that wonderful gift of ridding the world of him on your birthday.
Amen to that. One bitch went out, one bitch came in. Sorry, I
major upgrade though, because as you all know here at GABB, we fucking hate Ted Bundy.
Abso-freaking-lutely.
As you all should.
Right.
We'll get into that.
Okay, so who exactly was Ted Bundy? Well, he's not Zac Efron. Let me point that out.
I was going to say, they gave him a lot of credit.
Woo! Let me tell you, Zac Efron is like chef level kisses. And Ted Bundy was creepy looking. Sorry, that's my personal opinion. I go for like Kevin Smith and like, you know, Seth Green, Seth Rogen. Like, I'm a weirdo, but in no capacity do I find anything about those dead, scary eyes of Ted Bundy.
I was going to say, if I never knew anything about Ted Bundy, like if somebody just showed me this random ass picture and was like, isn't he hot? I'd be like,
no.
No.
Good for you. No.
Each their own.
Me.
But then, and then add on top of knowing who he was, what he did. He's not hot. Quit fucking saying that.
Right? Ugh. He's
Ugh.
so gross. So Ted Bundy was a 1970s serial killer, rapist, and, interesting enough, necrophiliac. He was executed in
Burns myself.
Florida's electric chair, good old Sparky, in 1989, my birthday, January 24th to be exact, at 7 a.m. And his case has inspired many novels, films, etc., docuseries, you name it, podcast. Like, I don't have enough time to research how much shit there is about Ted Bundy. That's how extensively he's been covered. It's insane.
It's everywhere.
So he's everywhere, and he should be nowhere because, like, ew. But yeah, we're
We'll get
still
into that.
talking about him. But like, the only reason is because it's like it's coincidental that it was on my birthday. So
Exactly, yeah.
let's dive into Ted Bundy, as he was pronounced at birth Theodore Robert Kroll on November 24th of 1946. He was born to Eleanor Louise Kroll, and his father has never been identified or has been confirmed. By some accounts, his birth certificate was assigned paternity to a salesman of the Air Force, an Air Force veteran to be exact, named Lloyd Marshall, although according to others, the father is listed as unknown. His mother claimed she had been seduced by a war veteran. That sounds so fucking romantic, but so creepy at the same time. Family members expressed suspicion that Bundy may have been fathered by her own father, Samuel Crowell.
Oh,
But, very important, no evidence has ever been cited to support this alleged claim.
okay.
It's just another
Like a
like little
rumor.
tidbit, rumor, creepy, ooey that makes you like
Maybe an attempt
feel,
to get the weirdos who sensationalize and romanticize him to be like, no.
oh, poor Ted. No, not poor Ted. Fuck Ted. That's what the episode should be called, is Fuck Ted.
I have so many episode ideas. We'll see what we
So
land on.
for the
Our
first,
meeting is called Ted Bundy is gross. Our notes are
yes.
called Ted Bundy is not hot. And like it's everywhere.
Ted Bundy is unfortunately everywhere. For the first 3 years of his life, Ted lived in Philadelphia, home of his maternal grandparents. And they raised him as their son to avoid the social stigmatism that accompanied birth outside of wedlock. For God's sake, how dare your parents not be married? For shame. I hate that. I hate when people call children bastards. Like, it's like a whole thing. I don't like it. It's icky, it's gross, it's tacky. Stop it. I digress. Family, friends, and even young Ted were told that his grandparents were his actual mother and father, and his older sister, his mother, was just that, his sister. However, the truth came to light, and circumstances vary on how that came to be. He told a girlfriend that a cousin showed him a copy of his birth certificate and called him a bastard, which
God.
is horrible. The only time I'll probably feel sorry for Ted Bundy. He told his biographer, Stephen McLeod, probably pronouncing that wrong, and Hugh Ainsworth, that he found the certificate himself. Biographer and true crime writer Anne Rule. Anybody heard of her?
No,
Yeah,
not at all.
right.
I'm joking.
She knew Ted personally and believed that he did not find out until 1969 when he located the original birth certificate in Vermont. Now, Ted expressed a lifelong resentment towards his mother for never telling him about his real father and for leaving him to discover his true paternity and heritage all by himself. I
I
mean,
get that, but
it's a
it leading
lot,
to
but
murder.
it's not okay. So, this makes you sound like you should feel bad for the dude. You shouldn't. I'm just saying you shouldn't.
A lot of
Eh,
backgrounds of killers sound like that because they did have horrible childhood stuff. And
Yeah.
You said it several times. It's not an excuse to kill people. And there's probably some other psychological thing
mental illness,
into it.
psychological past abuse, etc. is no excuse to be a dick, by the way. It's no excuse to murder people. Like, go to counseling. Be normal. Damn. Normal's an understatement because nobody's normal. Everyone's weird. Weird is excellent. But, like, try to better yourself
Try to be a
instead of,
decent human being
yeah,
because
instead of
everybody has
murdering everyone.
trauma of some aspect. Some is a
Right.
lot worse than others, but at the end of the day, you still shouldn't kill people and be like, but my life was bad. No one gives a fuck, Ted.
Right. Well, in certain interviews, Ted Bundy spoke warmly of his grandparents and told Anne Rule that he identified, respected, and clung to his grandfather. In 1987, however, he and other family members told attorneys that Sam Crowell was a bully and a bigot, and he hated blacks, Italians, Catholic, and Jews. Also, what the fuck? Anyway, he allegedly beat his wife and animals in the home. He swung neighbors' cats allegedly by their tails. And he once threw Luis's younger sister Julia down a flight of stairs for overstepping. Overstepping what, motherfucker? Calm down. God. Ugh. I don't
You all
understand
can't see my
people.
face right now,
No, it's
but it's a
so
little disturbed.
ugh. It's so awful. He sometimes spoke aloud to unseen presences, which sounds paranormal to me, but I don't know.
We're schizophrenic.
Right? And he once flew into a violent rage when questions of Ted's paternity. Um, Ted described his grandmother as timid, obedient, and she periodically went under electrotherapy for her depression, which is just
Oh shit.
horrifying and sad and just fucking atrocious. I feel so bad for that woman and
One of them needed electrotherapy.
any
Doesn't
person
sound
who
like her.
lobotomies, electrotherapy, like any of that, like early
I was gonna say there
mental
is modern
intervention.
versions of
Oh,
electrotherapy that is different. I don't
than
know
what they
how
used to
different
go
'cause I'm not an
through.
expert on it, but I know that it is not the way it was back then. Back then, it was a horrible thing.
Yeah, and
So,
it's just sad when you look back on older cases and you're like, fuck.
mhm.
Um, she allegedly feared to leave their house towards the end of her life. Bundy occasionally exhibited disturbing behaviors at an early age. Go fucking figure. Julia recalled awakening from a nap and found herself surrounded by kitchen knives and a 3-year-old Ted standing by the bed smiling. If that is not nightmare fuel, I don't know what is,
Look,
people.
kids are already terrifying.
Yeah,
Then you add in this,
right. The shit they say is just scary as it is.
adding kitchen
Um,
knives surrounding you.
like you go to sleep, you wake up surrounded by knives. The fuck.
With
And
a
then there's just a
3-year-old staring at you.
like eerily smiling like a black-eyed kid.
Mm.
um Anyhow, the descriptions of Ted's grandparents have been questioned in more recent investigations. Bundy, as a senior in high school, 1965. In 1950, Louise changed her name to her surname from Crowell to Nelson. And so eventually she, at the urging of multiple family members, left Philadelphia with Ted to live with cousins Alan and Jane Scott in Tacoma, Washington. Now, in 1951, his mother met Johnny Bundy. I can't pronounce his other option name, so there's that. He was a hospital cook, and she met him at an adult singles night at the First Methodist Church. They later married that year, and John or Johnny Bundy, he adopted Ted, which is really sweet. Johnny and Luis conceived 4 children of their own, although Johnny tried to include his adopted son into camping trips and other family activities. Ted remained very distant, and he later complained to a girlfriend that Johnny wasn't his real father and wasn't very bright and didn't make very much money. Okay,
Oh,
asshole. How much money do
sounds
you
like
make as
he
a
tried.
teenager? Yeah, it sounds like it was a grown ass man that took somebody else's responsibilities and made them his own, loved you as his own, tried his very best, and you're still shitting on this guy. Good for you,
We'll never
Ted.
know what happened behind closed doors, but based off the
Absolutely not.
description,
Ted varied his recollections of living in Tacoma over the years. He described roaming his neighborhoods, picking through trash barrels in search of pictures of naked women. Ew, yuck. But I get that, like, curiosity of a teenager going through a very influx
it's
of
more you
hormones.
knowing what we know now about him.
It's just ooey because of how he turned out.
Exactly.
I don't ick anyone's ooze. I just think Ted's gross. He told Paulie Nelson that he pursued detective magazine crime novels and true crime documentaries for stories that involve sexual violence, particularly when the stories were illustrated with pictures of dead or maimed bodies. Yeah. So later he told Ann Rule, however, he never read fact detective magazines and shuddered at the thought. Liar.
I was about to
And that
say.
and that anyone like anyone would. He told someone else he would consume large quantities of alcohol and canvass the community late at night in search of unwrapped windows. I guess unlocked is what that means. I don't know.
Like, doesn't have
Um
a screen.
oh, maybe like no curtains so he could see women undressing
Oh,
or whatever else could be seen. Accounts of his social life varied. He told Michelad and Answorth that he chose to be alone. Oh, I'm sure he did, because who would want to be his fucking friend? In adolescence, because he was unable to understand interpersonal relationships. He claimed he had no natural sense of how to develop friendships. Quote, I didn't know what made people want to be friends. I didn't know what underlaid societal interactions. End quote.
that's called being a psychopath.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
I mean,
literally.
yeah. And so his classmates from Woodrow Wilson High School told Ann Rule, however, Ted Bundy was well known and well liked. There was a medium sized fish in a large pond. So he wasn't like the biggest, baddest boy on campus, but he was kind of close to it. Um, he was an athlete. He did downhill skiing. He pursued um a lot of different like athletic shit, like cool for you, Ted. He did it enthusiastically, apparently, using stolen equipment and forging lift tickets for his skiing activities. Cool story, bro.
Like,
During
could have
his
been semi-normal,
right, you
but
could
you
have just
still
like,
couldn't.
but remember his stepdad or adopted dad was so poor. Like, how could they afford it? Dick face. During high school, he was arrested at least twice on suspicion of burglary and auto theft. When he reached the age of 18, the details of the incidents were expunged from his records, customary for Washington and many other states for minors. So let's jump into his university years. Now, he graduated high school in 1965. He attended the University of Puget Sounds, or UPS, which is hysterical because it's also a postal service. Anyways, for 1 year before transferring to the University of Washington, UW, for him to study Chinese, which is kind of cool. In 67, he became romantically involved with a classmate at UW who is identified by a lot of pseudonyms and a lot of Bundy biographies. Stephanie Brooks, to name one. In 1968, he dropped out of college, worked a series of minimum wage jobs. He also volunteered at the Seattle office of Nelson Rutherford's presidential campaign and became an Arthur Fletcher's driver and bodyguard during Fletcher's campaign. Sounds like he had his shit together. He didn't, guys. Fair warning, he didn't.
People like that are great at pretending to be normal.
Exactly. So he was the driver and bodyguard for Fletcher's campaign during the campaign for Lieutenant Governor of Washington State. In August, Bundy attended the 1968 Republican National Convention in Miami as a Rockefeller delegate. Shortly after, Brooks ended their relationships and returned to the family home in California, frustrated with what she described as Bundy's immaturity and lack of ambition. I feel that. A psychologist named Dorothy Lewis would later pinpoint this crisis as probably the pivotal time in his development. So, what that, in my opinion, means that's when, like, he snapped. Devastated by Brooks' rejection, Bundy traveled to Colorado and farther east, visiting relatives in Arkansas and Philadelphia, enrolling for one semester at Temple University. It was at this time in early 1969 that Ann Rule believed that Ted Bundy visited the Office of Birth Records in Burlington and confirmed his true parentage. Now, Ted was back in Washington by the fall of 1969, and he met Elizabeth Kohlpfeifer. It's really hard to pronounce. I'm so sorry if I did that injustice. Identified in Bundy's literature as Meg Anders, Beth Archer, or Liz Kendall, a divorcee from Ogden, Utah, who worked as a secretary at the University of Washington School of Medicine. Their very stormy relationship would continue well past his initial incarceration in Utah in 1976. Now, it's the mid 70s. Ted was focused and goal oriented at UW. Good for Ted. Now, at this time, he was a psych major. Oh, wow, a crazy person who creates chaos and destruction being a psych major? He was intrigued. He wanted to figure out how the mind works so he could hack
Manipulate it?
it and manipulate it. Yeah. Ugh.
That makes sense.
So in 71, he took a job at Seattle's Suicide Hotline Crisis Center. There he met and worked alongside Ann Rule, a former Seattle police officer, an aspiring crime writer who would later write one of the defining Bundy biographies, The Stranger Beside Me.
I have that on Audible.
Nice. I actually need to listen to it.
I've only listened to like the first chapter or so. Whenever I got it, ended up going on. I got distracted, never finished it.
ADD for the win. Anne saw nothing disturbing about Ted's personality at the time. She described him as kind and empathetic. After graduating from UW in 72, he joined Governor Daniel J. Evans' re-election campaign, posing as a colleague student, and he shadows Evans' opponent, former Governor Albert Rossellini, and recorded his stump speeches, and he analyzed things for Evans' team, and Evans appointed Ted Bundy as Seattle's crime prevention adversary committee. That's funny. To me anyways, probably not to anyone else. After Evans was reelected, Bundy was hired as an assistant to Ross Davis's chair. He was Ross Davis's chairman of the Washington State Republican Party. Davis thought well of Ted and described him as smart, aggressive, and a believer in the system. Now, in 1973, despite mediocrity in the LSAT scores, Bundy was accepted into law school of UPS and the University of Utah. The strength of letters of recommendations from Evans, Davis, and several UW psychology professors was astounding. He has so many letters of recommendation, like good for Ted. He's a con artist, but whatever.
Oh, charming.
So charming, so handsome. Meh. During a trip to California on a Republican Party business trip in the summer of 1973, Ted rekindled a relationship with Brooks. She marveled at the transformation of Ted into a serious, dedicated professional, seeming on the cusp of significant legal and political career. He continued to date. He continued to date Kelfer as well. Sorry if I butchered that name. I really do mean to try. Neither woman was aware of the other's existence. Makes sense. In the fall of 73, Ted matriculated at USPS Law School and continued courting Brooks, who flew to Seattle several times to stay with him. They even once talked about marriage, to the point of introducing Davis as his fiance.
Oh.
Now we're at January of 74. He abruptly broke off all contact with her. Her phone calls and letters went unread. Finally reaching him by phone a month later, man, he ghosted the shit out of her. She demanded to know why Bundy had alienated her and ended their relationship without explanation.
Yeah, valid.
In a flat, calm, probably creepy voice, he replied, "Stephanie, I have no idea what you mean." And then hung up. And she never heard from him
Gaslighting
again.
motherfucker.
Right? He later
God.
explained, "I just wanted to prove myself that I could have married her." What an asshole.
Middle finger up
Anyhow,
at that.
Stephanie's so much better without him.
Mm-hmm.
I bet
Dodged a bullet, girl.
I bet she realized she dodged a major bullet later on down the line. In retrospect, Brooks said that he deliberately planned their entire courtship and rejection in advance as vengeance for the breakup that she initiated in 1968. What a dick.
Move the fuck on.
Right? But some people just don't know how.
Yeah.
Some people don't know how to take accountability and act like fucking adults. And that's like everywhere. That's not just
Yeah.
a serial killer
That's
thing.
not just killers. Yeah, that's universal.
That's just like most people. And I have my faults, but when I'm wrong, I will openly admit to it and be like, "You know what? I fucked up. I'm sorry." A lot of people can't do that, and that's really sad. Anywho, Ted began skipping classes at law school, of course. And by April, he entirely stopped attending. Just like, meh, I'm done.
Yeah.
And then the plot thickens. Young women began disappearing in the Pacific Northwest. Now, there is no consensus on where or when Ted began killing women. He has told different stories to different people and refused to divulge the specifics of his earliest crimes, even as he confessed in graphic detail to dozens of the later murders in the days preceding his execution. He told Nelson that he attempted his first kidnapping in 1969 in Ocean City, New Jersey, but did not kill anyone until sometime in 71 in Seattle.
This isn't so casually.
So casually. He told the psychologist Art Norman that he killed 2 women in Atlantic City in 1969 while visiting family in Philadelphia. He hinted but completely refused to elaborate on the homicide. Detective Robert D. Keppel said he committed a murder in Seattle in 72 and another in 73 that involved a hitchhiker near Tumwater. Rule and Keppel both believed that he might have started killing as a teenager. And I honestly believe that as well.
Absolutely.
The earliest documented homicides were committed in 1974 when he was 27. By then, by his own admission, he had mastered the necessary skills. Let me rephrase that. He honed in on how to be a serial killer, in his own words. Like, that's
He
so
literally
sad.
studied it.
He did, because he was trying to be a psychology major. Now, in the era before DNA profiling that left minimal incriminating forensic evidence at crime scenes, shortly after midnight on January 4th of 1974, around the time that he terminated that relationship with Miss Stephanie Brooks, Ted entered the basement apartment of an 18-year-old Karen Sparks residence. Yeah. A dancer and student at UW. After bludgeoning Sparks senseless with a metal rod from her bed frame, he sexually assaulted her with either the rod or a metal speculum. Paused for vomiting. It's a lot. He caused internal injuries, obviously. She remained unconscious for 10 days but survived.
Go, girl.
However, she had permanent physical and mental disabilities after the fact. In the early morning hours of February 1st, Ted broke into the basement room of Linda Ann Healy at UW's undergrad, who broadcast morning radio weather reports for the skiers. He beat her unconscious, dressed her in blue jeans and a white blouse and boots, and carried her away. During the first half of 1974, female college students disappeared at a rate at about one per month. That's terrifying.
Ah.
And it's like, once he, in my opinion, once he started killing, he could not stop.
I can see that, especially since he practiced and
escalated.
honed it and all that. Yeah.
He just completely escalated. One a month? That's a lot of murder, people. So on March 12th, Donna Gale Mason, a 19-year-old student of the Evergreen State College in Olympia, 60 miles southwest of Seattle, left her home to attend a jazz concert on campus, but she never arrived. On April 17th, Suzanne Rancourt disappeared while on her way to the dorm after an evening's advisors meeting at Central Washington State College in Ellenburg, 110 miles southeast of Seattle. Two female Central Washington State students later came forward to report encounters, one on the night of Rancourt's disappearing and the other 3 nights earlier. A man wearing an arm sling, asking for help, carrying a load of books to his brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle.
I always pictured it yellow.
I always thought it was yellow too, but I think it's just like shitty photography, if that makes sense.
Okay. Or
Like,
even just where our brains go when we think classic Beetle.
Yeah. So on May 6th, Roberta Parks left her dorm in Oregon State University at Cornelius, 260 miles south of Seattle, to have coffee with some friends at the Memorial Union. But she never arrived. Now, the detectives from Kings County and Seattle Police Departments grew increasingly concerned that there was no significant physical evidence, and these missing women had very little in common apart from being young, attractive white college students with long hair parted down the middle.
This is why side parts are important.
I know that was skinny jeans all day. Yay.
That might have been an inappropriate joke. We cope with humor.
Yeah, we do. Now on June 1st, Brenda Ball, she was 22. She disappeared after leaving the Flame Tavern near Seattle Tacoma International Airport. She was last seen in the parking lot talking to a brown-haired man with his arm in a sling. Sound familiar? In the early hours of June 11th, a UW student, Georgian Hawkins, vanished while walking down a brightly lit alley between her boyfriend's dorm and her sorority house. Bright lit day. Disappeared. The next morning, 3 Seattle homicide detectives and a crime analyst combined combed the entire alleyway on their hands and knees, but they found nothing. Bundy later told Keppel that he lured Hawkins into his car and knocked her unconscious with a crowbar. After handcuffing her, he drove her to, I apologize in advance, Issaquah, a suburb 20 miles east of Seattle, where he strangled her and spent the entire night with her body. He told Keppel that he returned to UW to the alleyway the morning after in the midst of a major crime scene investigation, and he gathered Hawkins' earrings and one of her shoes where he had left them in the adjoining parking lot and just completely departed unobserved. Quote, "It was a feat so brazen," wrote Keppel. Quote, "It is astonishing, police even today said," end quote. He said he revised Hawkins' corpse on 3 occasions. And after Hawkins' disappearance was publicized, witnesses came forward, reported seeing a man in an alley behind the nearby dormitory, and he was on crutches with a leg cast and was struggling to carry a briefcase. One woman recalled that the man asked her to help him carry his case to his car, a light brown Volkswagen Beetle. During this period, Ted was working in Olympia as an assistant director to the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Commission, where he wrote a pamphlet for women on rape prevention.
Kind of thing's pretty typical with killers. Like, they want to be close to see if they're being figured out.
It's so sickening, though.
Very much so.
He later worked for the Department of Emergency Services, a state government agency involved in the search for the missing women. As a DES employee, he met and dated Carol Ann Bone, a twice divorced mother of 2 who 6 years later would play a very important role in the final phases of Ted Bundy's life. In 1968, the Volkswagen Beetle in question that we've been talking about, which he committed most of his crimes in, now at display at the National Museum of Crime and Punishment, reports that 6 missing women and the Sparks brutal beating appeared prominently in the newspaper and on television throughout Washington and Oregon. Fear spread among the population. Hitchhiking was advised to not be done by young women, and it dropped sharply. Pressure mounted on law enforcement agencies, but the lack of physical evidence severely hampered their investigation. Like, it just hindered them. Police could not provide reporters with much more than little information that they had available to them for fear of compromising the investigation. Further, similarities between victims were noted. The disappearances all took place at night, usually near ongoing construction work within a week of midterms or finals, and all of the victims were wearing slacks or blue jeans. At most crime scenes, there were sightings of a man wearing a cast or a sling, and he was driving a brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle. The Pacific Northwest murders accumulated on July 14th with broad daylight abductions of 2 women from a crowded beach at Lake Samaras Park, or State Park in Issaquah. 5 female witnesses described an attractive young man wearing white tennis outfit with his left arm in a sling, speaking with a light accent perhaps Canadian or British. He introduced himself as Ted. What a dumbass, by the way. He
People
asked for,
like that think they're the smartest person in the room.
I know, it's so gross. He asked for their help unloading a sailboat from his tan or bronze colored Volkswagen Beetle. 4 refused. 1 accompanied him as far as his car. When she saw that there was no sailboat, she fled.
For
Additional
her.
witnesses, yeah, right, saw him approach Janice Ann Ott, 23, a probation caseworker for the King County Juvenile Court, with a sailboat story and watched her leave the bench in his company. About 4 hours later, Denise Mary Nailslud, sorry, a 19-year-old woman was studying to become a computer programmer, left a picnic to go to the restroom. She never returned. Bundy told Stephen McLeod and William Hagmeyer that Ott was still alive when he returned with Naslund, and that he forced one to watch as he murdered the other. But he later denied it in an interview with Lewis on the eve of his execution. Now, the King County Police, finally armed with a detailed description of their suspect, his car, etc., posted flyers throughout Seattle. A composition sketch was printed in the regional newspaper and broadcast on local television. Elizabeth Colfer, Ann Rule, and a DES employee and a UW psychology professor all recognized the profile, the sketch, and the car, and reported Ted Bundy as a possible suspect.
I just have to say, as a side note, how brave it is to see something like that and be like, I think I know that person and I've never known them to be anything other than kind. Something's not right, and to say something.
Right.
That's
If
amazing.
you see something, say something. If you
And if
feel a certain
something
way,
doesn't feel right in your gut,
say
trust it.
something, you know? So they reported Ted as a possible suspect. However, detectives were receiving up to like 200 plus tips a day. They thought it unlikely that a clean-cut law student with no adult criminal record could be a perpetrator.
Which we know now
Right.
probably makes
Now,
them the most likely suspect.
on September 6th, 2 hunters stumbled across the skeletal remains of Ott and Naslund near a service road in Issaquah, 2 miles east of Lake Samashi State Park. I am so sorry. I don't know how to say all these words. I've tried Googling them. Google gives me different things. I'm trying. I really am. And an extra femur and several vertebrae were found at the site and were later identified as by Bundy as those of Georgianne Hawkins. 6 months later, forestry studies students from Green River Community College discovered skulls, mandibles of Gila, Rancourt Parks, and Ball on Taylor Mountain, where Bundy frequently hiked, just east of Issaquah. Manson's remains were never recovered. So where does that leave us? Unfortunately, we're not near the end. We are in Idaho, Utah, and Colorado now.
Okay.
So we've left Seattle. I wish that's where it stopped, but it doesn't. So, roaming house in Salt Lake City, where Bundy lived from September of 74 to October of 75. He showed the fire escape where he used to sneak in his room and windows to the utility room where he concealed photos, souvenirs, etc. from his murders. Ugh. Why do they always keep souvenirs? It's so gross. Anyhow.
I'm sure there's some weird psychological.
I'm sure, but it's so icky.
Yeah.
In 1974, Ted received a second acceptance from the University of Utah Law School, and he moved to Salt Lake City, leaving Kefner in Seattle. While he called her often, he dated at least a dozen other women as he studied his first year of law school. He accumulated a second time. He was devastated to find out that other students had something that he lacked, some intellectual capacity that he did not. He found the classes completely incomprehensible. It was a great disappointment to me, he said. So he feels like less of a man because other people are smarter than him. And then a new string of homicides began in the following month.
Oh, yes. Toxic masculine rage.
Yes. Including 2 that would remain undiscovered until he confessed, Bundy confessed, that is, to them shortly before his execution. On September 2nd, he raped and strangled a still unidentified hitchhiker in Idaho. And he either disposed of the remains immediately in a nearby river or returned the next day, photographed, and dismembered the corpse. I'm just grossed out by that. On October 2nd, he seized 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox in Holiday, a suburb of Salt Lake City. Her remains were buried near the Capitol Reef National Park, some 200 miles south of Holiday, but were never found. On October 18th, Melissa Ann Smith, the 17-year-old daughter of the police chief of Midval, another Salt Lake City suburb, disappeared after leaving a pizza parlor. Her naked body was found nearby in a mountainous area 9 days later. A post-mortem examination identified that she may have remained alive for up to 7 days. 7 days after her disappearance. On October 31st, Laura Ann Aim, also 17, disappeared 25 miles south of Lehi after leaving a cafe just after midnight. Her naked body was found by hitchhikers 9 miles to the northeast of the American Fork Canyon on Thanksgiving Day. Both women had been beaten, raped, sodomized, strangled with a nylon stocking. Now, years later, Ted described this post-mortem ritual with their corpses of Smith and Aim, including how he would shampoo their hair and he would apply makeup. Yeah.
Oh.
In the late afternoon of November 8th, Ted Bundy approached 18-year-old telephone operator Carol Duranch at Fashion Palace Mall in Murray, less than a mile from the Midval restaurant where Melissa Smith was last seen. He identified himself as Officer Roseland of the Murray Police Department and told her that someone had attempted to break into her vehicle. He asked her to accompany her to the station to file a complaint. When Duranch pointed out to Bundy that he was driving on a road that did not lead to the police station, he immediately pulled onto the shoulder and attempted to handcuff her. During the struggle, he inadvertently fastened both handcuffs to the same wrist, and she was able to open the car door and escape. Later that evening, Deborah Jean Kent, a 17-year-old student in Viewmont High School in Bontfault, just 20 miles north of Murray, disappeared after leaving a theater production at the school. Her brother was to pick her up. The school's drama teacher and a student told the police that a stranger had asked each of them to come to the parking lot to identify a car. Another student later saw the same man pacing near their auditorium. The drama teacher spotted him again, and before the end of the play, outside of the auditorium, investigators found a key that unlocked handcuffs removed from Carol Duranch's wrist in that parking lot. In November, Elizabeth Kelfer called King County Police a second time after reading that young women were disappearing in towns surrounding Salt Lake City. Detective Randy Hergsmeyer of Major Crimes Division interviewed her in detail. By then, Bundy had raised considerably on their uh, list of suspicious people. But Lake Samahi, I don't know how to say this. Sorry, guys. Witness considered the most reliable by the detectives failed to identify him from a photo lineup. And in December, Colfer called the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office and repeated her suspicions. Bundy's name was at the top of their list of suspects, but at the time, no credible forensic evidence linked him to the Utah crimes.
It's so frustrating. And I know it has to do with times and like lack of technology like we have now. To know that tips were saying it, they believed it, and they could do nothing.
Yeah. And it's so frustrating because they wanted to. So
I
now we're
am.
in
I would
January
hope
of
anyway. No.
75. Bundy returned to Seattle after his final exams and spent a week with Kelfner, who did not tell him that she had reported him to police on 3 occasions. Smart girl. She made plans to visit him in Salt Lake in August. Karen Campbell, his 14th documented murder victim and subject of his first homicide incident.
Documented.
Yeah, documented. How
A
fucked up is that?
significant word there. Oh.
In 1975, Ted shifted much of his criminal activities eastward from his base in Utah to Colorado. Now, on January 12th, a 23-year-old registered nurse named Carolyn Eileen Campbell disappeared while walking down a well-lit hallway between the elevator and her room at the Wildwood Inn, now Wildwood Lodge in Snowmass Village, 400 miles southeast of Salt Lake City. Her nude body was found a month later next to a dirt road outside of the resort. She had been killed by blows to the head from a blunt instrument that left a distinctive, lingering, grooved impression on her skull. Her body also bore deep cuts from a sharp weapon. It's just monstrous. On March 15th, 100 miles away, northeast of Snowmass, in Vail, ski instructor Julie Cunningham, 26, disappeared while walking from her apartment to a date with a friend. Bundy later told Colorado investigators that he approached Cunningham on crutches and asked her to help him carry his ski boots to his car, where he clubbed and then handcuffed her, assaulted and strangled her at a secondary site near Rifle, 90 miles west of Vail. Weeks later, he made the 6-hour drive from Salt Lake City to revisit her remains, which is just so fucking gross. Denise Lynn Oliverson, 25, disappeared near Utah-Colorado border and Grand Junction, which is surprising because I've actually been to Grand Junction. On April 6th, while riding her bicycle to her parents' house, her bike and sandals were found under a vacant railroad bridge. On May 6th, Bundy lured 12-year-old Lynette Dawn Culver from Alameda Junior High School in Pocatello, Idaho, 160 miles north of Salt Lake City. He drowned, then sexually assaulted her in his hotel room before disposing of her body, possibly north of the Pocatello. Karen Campbell disappeared while walking down this brightly lit hallway to her hotel room. In mid-May, 3 of Bundy's Washington State's DES coworkers, including Carol Ann Boone, visited him in Salt Lake City and stayed for a week in his apartment. Bundy subsequently spent a week in Seattle with Kelfner in early June, and they discussed getting married the following Christmas. Again, she made no mention of her multiple discussions with the King County Police and the Salt Lake City Sheriff's Office, Bundy disclosed neither his ongoing relationship with Boone nor a concurrent romance with a Utah law student known in various accounts as Kim Andrews or Sharon Allner. No, I don't know. Hard to pronounce, I apologize. On June 28th, Susan Curtis vanished from the campus of Brigham Young University in Provo, 45 miles south of the Salt Lake City area. Curtis became Bundy's last confession. Tapes recorded moments before he entered the execution chamber. The bodies of Wilcox, Kent, Cunningham, Oliverson, Culver, and Curtis, they were never recovered. In September of 1975, he was baptized, because he's a godly man apparently, into the
He did
Church
work
of
in a
Jesus.
church for a while, didn't he?
Yeah, into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Although he was not an active participant in services and he ignored most of the church's restrictions, he would later become excommunicated by the LDS Church in 1976 when he was convicted for kidnapping. When asked about his religious preference after his arrest, Bundy answered Methodist, the religion of his childhood. In Washington state, investigators were still struggling to analyze the Pacific Northwest murder spree that had ended abruptly just as it had began. An effort to make sense of the overwhelming mass of data they had restored to then investigate a strategy of compiling a database. The Kings County payroll computer is what they used, a quote, huge primitive machine by contemporary standards, but the only available computer for use at their time. After inputting the many lists they had compiled, classmates, acquaintances of each victims, of Volkswagen owners, names, Ted, also known sex offenders, and so on, they queried the computer for coincidences. Out of thousands of names, 26 turned up on that list. One was Ted Bundy. So out of 26 names, Ted Bundy was one of them. And that's just wild considering how archaic it seems those computers were at this age. Detectives also manually compiled a list of the 100 best suspects. Bundy was on that list as well. And he was, quote, literally at the top of the pile of suspects.
Of course.
Yep. When word came from the Utah area of his arrest, items found in his Volkswagen in 1975. He was arrested by Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Hayward in Granger, another Salt Lake City suburb. Hayward observed Bundy cruising at in a residential area in the pre-dawn hours, and he was at a speed considered a fleeing high speed after seeing the patrol car. He noticed that the Volkswagen's front passenger seat had been removed and placed on the rear seats, and then he searched the car. He found a ski mask, a second mask fashioned from pantyhose, a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bags, a coil of rope, an ice pick, and other items initially assumed to be burglary tools. Bundy explained that the ski mask was for skiing, and then he found the handcuffs in a dumpster.
But literally why he started skiing all the time was to have an excuse to have a ski mask?
Probably. And, the rest were just household items.
Obvious.
However, the detective, Jerry Thompson, remembered a similar suspect and car description from the November 1974 Durant kidnapping and Bundy's name from Kefner's December 1974 phone call. In search of Bundy's apartment, the police found a guide to Colorado ski resorts with check marks by the Whalewood Inn, a brochure that advertised the Viewmont High School play in Bountiful, and where Deborah Kent had disappeared. The police did not have sufficient evidence to detain him. However, he was released on his own recognizance. I hate it when they do that. He later said that searchers missed a hidden collection of Polaroids that he had of his victims, which he destroyed after he was released. Place Salt Lake City police Bundy on a 24-hour surveillance, and Thompson flew to Seattle with 2 other detectives to interview Keffler, who told them that in the years prior to his move to Utah, she had discovered objects that she couldn't understand in her home and in Bundy's apartment. These items included crutches, bags of plaster of Paris that he
I was gonna
admitted
ask where he got the casts.
that he stole from a medical supply house,
Wow.
and a meat cleaver that was never used for cooking. Other objects included surgical gloves, a oriental knife, and a wooden case that he kept in his glove box, a sack of women's clothing. He was in a lot of debt, and she suspected that he had stolen almost everything of significant value he possessed. When she confronted him over a new TV and stereo that he had, he warned her, quote, "If you tell anyone, I'll break your fucking neck."
Wow.
Yeah. She said Bundy became very upset whenever she considered cutting her hair, which was long and parted down the middle.
And I bet it was brown too, huh?
Probably. Wouldn't surprise me none. When she would sometimes awake in the middle of the night, she would find him under the bed covers with a flashlight examining her body.
Oh.
Ugh. He kept a lug wrench taped halfway up the hand in the trunk of his car, another Volkswagen Beetle, which he often borrowed for protection. Makes no sense. The detectives confirmed that Bundy had not been with Kelfner on any of the nights during the Pacific Northwest victims' vanishings, nor the day Ott or Noslud were abducted. Shortly thereafter, Kelfler was interviewed by Seattle homicide detective Kathy McChesney and learned of the existence of Stephanie Brooks and her brief engagement to Bundy around Christmas of 73. In 75, Ted Bundy had a mug shot. In September, Bundy sold his Volkswagen Beetle to a Midville teenager. Utah police impounded it, and the FBI technicians dismantled and searched it. They found hairs matching samples obtained from Carol Campbell's body. Later, they also identified strands microscopically from Melissa Smith, Carol Durant. The FBI lab specialist Robert Neal concluded that the presence of hair strands in one car matching 3 different victims had never met one another to be a coincidence of mind-boggling rarity. On October 2nd, coincidence. On October 2nd, detectives put Bundy into a lineup. Durant immediately identified him as Officer Roseland. A witness from Bountiful recognized him as a stranger at the high school auditorium. There was insufficient evidence to link him to Deborah Kent, whose body was never found. But there were more than enough evidence to charge him with aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault on Durant. So he was freed on $15,000 bail paid by his parents. Spent most of the time between indictment and trial in Seattle, living with Kepner in her house. Seattle police had insufficient evidence to charge him in the Pacific Northwest murders, but kept him under close surveillance. When Ted and I stepped out onto the porch to go somewhere, Kepner wrote, "So many unmarked police cars started up that it sounded like the beginning of the Indy 500." End quote. In November, 3 principal Bundy investigators, Jerry Thompson from Utah, Robert Keppel from Washington, and Michael Fisher from Colorado, met in Aspen, Colorado, and exchanged information with 30 detectives and prosecutors from 5 states. Now, the officials left the meeting, later known as the Aspen Summit, convinced that Bundy was, in fact, the murderer they sought after. They agreed that he had more hard evidence against him than would ever be needed to be charged for any of the murders. In February of 1976, Bundy stood trial for the DeRanch kidnapping on the advice of his attorney, John O'Connell. Bundy waived his right to a jury due to the negative public surroundings of the case. A 4-day bench trial, a weekend of deliberation. Judge Stuart Hansen Jr. found him guilty of kidnapping and assault. In June, he was sentenced to 15 years in the Utah State Prison. In October, he was found hiding in bushes in the prison yard carrying an escape kit, road map, airline schedules, and a social security card, and spent several weeks in solitary confinement. Later that month, in Colorado, authorities charged him with Carolyn Campbell's murder. After a period of resistance, he waived extradition proceedings and was transferred to Aspen in January of 77. So this motherfucker is ballsy enough to do all this shit, but then we get into the escapes. Yeah, you heard me. He escaped. Pitkin
Again,
County
people like
Courthouse.
that think they're smarter than everybody else.
Kinda he was, though, which is what's fucking terrifying. Because he outsmarted so many people, it's ridiculous.
Outsmarted or just manipulated?
Both, but it's still like it's impressive in a scary way.
Right. Get that?
Pitkin County Courthouse, where Bundy jumped from the second window of the from the left in the second story to escape. So on June 7th of 1977, he was transported 40 miles from the Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs to Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen for a preliminary hearing. And he elected to serve as his own attorney because he's so fucking cocky. And as such, he was excused by the judge from wearing handcuffs or shackles on his legs. During recess, he asked to visit the courthouse's law library to research his case. While shielded from his guard's view behind a bookcase, he opened a window, jumped to the ground from the second-story window, injuring his right ankle as he landed. I mean, good. I'm glad he got hurt. After shedding an hour later of clothing, he walked through Aspen's roadblocks that were being set up to the outskirts of town. Then he hitchhiked southward onto Aspen Mountain. Near the summit, he broke into a hunting cabin and stole food, clothing, and a rifle. The following day, he left the cabin, continued south towards Crested Butte, which I've also been to. And then he became lost in the forest. For 2 days, he wandered aimlessly on the mountain, missing 2 trails that led downward to his intended destination. Now, on June 10th, he broke into a camping trailer on Maroon Lake, 10 miles south of Aspen, taking food, a parka, and instead of continuing southward, he walked back north to Aspen, eluding the roadblocks and search parties along the way. Smart motherfucker. 3 days later, he stole a car at the edge of Aspen's golf course. Cold and sleep deprived, and in a constant pain from his sprained ankle. Poor Ted. He drove back to Aspen, where 2 police officers noticed his car weaving in and out of the lane and pulled him over. He had been a fugitive for 6 days. In the car were maps of the mountain surrounding Aspen that persecutors were using to demonstrate the location of Carol Campbell's body. His own attorney, Bundy, had rights of discovery. So he had their own information because he decided he was going to be his own fucking lawyer, which is and cocky. It indicated that the escape was not a spontaneous act, but that he had planned it. In 77, photography taken shortly after the first escape and recaptured from Bundy's FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives poster. Then he was back in Glenwood Jail. He ignored the advice of friends and legal advisors to stay put. Because why not listen? He's so smart. In the case against him, already weak at best, was deteriorating steadily as pretrial monitors consistently resolved in his favor, and a significant bit of evidence was ruled inadmissible. A more rational defense may have realized that he stood a good chance of acquittal, and beating the murder charge in Colorado would have dissuaded other prosecutors with as little as a year and a half to serve for Duranche's conviction. Had Ted preserved or persevered, he could have been free, a free man. But instead, he was cocky. He assembled a new escape plan. He acquired and detailed the floor plan of the jail, a hacksaw blade from other inmates, and accumulated $500 in cash smuggled in over a 6-month period.
Where
He
did an
later,
inmate get a hacksaw blade?
I don't even know how, like, it's scary what people can
You know,
get in
just
prison.
casually. He got a blade from another. Oh,
Right? Just so casually.
okay.
He acquired $500 in cash smuggled in over a 6-month period. He later said by visitor Carol Ann Boone in particular, during the evenings while the other prisoners were showering, he sawed a hole about 1 square foot between steel reinforced bars in the ceiling, and having lost 35 pounds, was able to wiggle through the crawl space above. If that's not a reason to diet, I don't know what is. So, in the weeks that followed, he made a series of practice runs exploring the space, multiple reports from information or an informant of movement within the ceiling during the night, but they weren't investigated. In 77, Bundy's impending trial had become a big thing in the small town of Aspen. And Bundy filed for a motion for a change of venue to Denver. On December 23rd, the Aspen trial judge granted the request, but to Colorado Springs, where juries had historically been hostile to murder suspects. Good for them. The night of December 30th, with most of the jail staff on Christmas break and nonviolent prisoners on furlough with their families, Bundy piled books and files into his bed, covering them with a blanket to simulate him sleeping. He climbed into the crawl space. He broke through the ceiling into the apartment of the chief jailer, who was out for the evening with his wife, changed into street clothes from the jailer's closet, and walked out the front door to freedom. He stole a car, drove eastward out of Glenwood Springs, but the car he stole soon broke down in the mountains on the interstate of I-70.
How was the universe trying to stop him?
Right? A passing motorist gave him a ride into Vail, 60 miles east. From there, he caught a bus to Denver. He boarded a morning flight to Chicago. In Glenwood Springs, the jail's skeleton crew did not discover the escapee until noon on December 31st. More than 17 hours later. By then,
Till
he was already in
noon?
Chicago. Yep, 17 hours. By then, he was in Chicago. Yep. So then, from Chicago, Bundy traveled by train to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he was present in a local tavern on January 2nd. 5 days later, he stole a car and drove to Atlanta. He boarded a bus, went to Tallahassee. The morning of January 8th, he stayed for one night in the Holiday Inn before he rented a room under an alias, Chris Hagen, at a boarding house near the Florida State University, FSU. And he said that he initially resorted to find legitimate employment and refrain from further criminal activity, knowing he would probably remain a free man, undetected in Florida, unidentified, as long as he did not attract the attention of the police.
This is Florida.
Right, it's Florida. But his loan job application, and it was at a construction site, had to be abandoned when he was asked to produce identification. He reverted to his old habits of shoplifting, stealing money and credit cards from women's wallets left in shopping carts at local groceries. In the early hours of January 15th of 78, 1 week after his arrival in Tallahassee, he entered FSU's Chi Omega sorority house through a rear door with a faulty locking mechanism. About 2:45 a.m., he bludgeoned Margaret Bowman, 21, with a piece of oak wood firewood as she slept. Then he garnered her with a nylon stocking. He entered the bedroom of 20-year-old Lisa Levy and beat her unconscious, strangled her, tore one of her nipples, bit deeply into her left buttocks, and sexually assaulted her with a hair mist bottle. In the adjoining room, he attacked Kathy Kleiner, breaking her jaw and deeply lacerating her shoulder, and Karen Chandler, who suffered a concussion, broken jaw, loss of teeth, and a crushed finger. Chandler and Kleiner survived the attack. Kleiner attributed her survival to automobile headlights illuminating the interior room and frightening away the attacker, aka Ted Bundy. Bundy escaped, but not before being seen by sorority sister Nita Neary, who came through the back door and saw Bundy as he was exiting the sorority house. Tallahassee detectives determined that the 4 attacks took place in a total of less than 15 minutes within earshot of 30 witnesses who heard nothing.
Well, at this
After
point, he
leaving,
gives no more fucks. He's well
oh yeah,
practiced.
well, I mean, I could work a regular job, but they want me to produce my identity, so let's just go murder more people. That sounds logical.
Reasonable.
Bundy broke into a basement apartment 8 blocks away and attacked the FSU student Cheryl Thomas, dislocating her shoulder and fracturing her jaw and skull in 5 places. She was left with permanent deafness, equilibrium damage, and it ended her dance career. On Thomas's bed, police found a semen sample on a pantyhose mask containing 2 hairs similar to Bundy's in class and characteristics. Lisa Livy and Margaret Bowman, 2 of Bundy's victims, on February 8th. Bundy drove 150 miles to Jacksonville in a stolen FSU van, and in the parking lot, he approached a fucking 14-year-old named Leslie Parmenter, the daughter of Jacksonville Police Department Chief of Detectives, identifying himself as Richard Burton Fire Department, but retreated when Paramont's older brother arrived and challenged him. And that afternoon, he backtracked 60 miles to Lake City. At Lake City Junior High, following morning, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach was summoned to her homeroom by a teacher, retrieved and forgotten purse. She never returned to class. 7 weeks later, after an intensive search, her partially mummified remains were found in a pig farrowing shed near Shawnee River State Park, 35 miles northeast of Salt Lake. She appeared to have been raped, then killed by lacerations with a knife. On February 12th, with insufficiency to his cash flow, his overdue rent, and a growing suspicion that police were closing in on him, he stole a car and fled to Tallahassee, driving westward across the Florida Panhandle. And 3 days later, at around 1 a.m., he was stopped by a Pensacola police officer, David Lee, near the Alabama state line, after a want and warrants check showed his Volkswagen Beetle was stolen. What is with him and Volkswagens, man? So when
And
he was
loyalty.
right, diehard fan. So when he was under arrest, Bundy kicked out the officer's legs from underneath him and took off running. Lee fired 2 warning shots, then gave him a chase and tackled him. The 2 struggled over Lee's gun before the officer finally subdued and arrested Ted Bundy. The stolen vehicle, they found 3 sets of IDs belonging to 3 females from FSU who were students, 21 stolen credit cards, a stolen television. They found dark-rimmed non-prescription glasses, a pair of plaid slacks, later identifies as the disguise worn by Richard Burton, the fire department guy, in Jacksonville, as Lee transported his suspect, unaware that he was arresting FBI's 10 most wanted fugitive, Ted Bundy. He heard him say, Bundy, that is, I wish you had killed me. So they're in Miami in 1979, preliminary hearing. Following a change of venue, Bundy stood trial for the Chi Omega homicides and assaults In 1979, the trial was covered by 250 reporters, from 5 continents, and was the first to be televised nationally in the United States. That's kind of huge. Despite the presence of 5 court-appointed attorneys, Bundy again handled much of his own legal defense. From the beginning, he sabotaged the entire defense efforts out of spite, distrust, and grandiose delusions. Nelson later wrote, Ted was facing murder charges with a possible death sentence, and all that mattered to him, apparently, was that he was to be in charge. According to Mike Morava of Tallahassee public defender, a member of the defense team, and a pre-trial plea bargain was negotiated, which Bundy pled guilty to killing Levy, Bowman, Leach in exchange for a firm 75 years in prison. Persecutors were, not happy, but it is what it is. And one account, the prospects of losing at a trial were very good. So they weren't happy, but they thought they might lose the case, so it is what it is. Bundy, on the other hand, saw the plea deal not only as a means of avoiding death penalty, but also a tactical move, because he's a dick. He could enter his plea and then wait a few years for the evidence to disintegrate or become lost, and for witnesses to die, move on, retract their testimonies, etc. Once the case against him had deteriorated beyond repair, he then would file a post-conviction motion to set aside the plea and secure an acquittal. At the last minute, however, Bundy refused the deal. Quote, it made him realize he was going to have to stand in front of the whole world and say he was guilty. Minerva said he just couldn't do it. Orthodontist Richard Silverman explained that the bite mark evidence at the Chi Omega trial was a crucial testimony for the sorority member Connie Hastings, who placed Bundy in the vicinity of her house that evening, and Nita Neary, who saw him leaving the sorority house, clutching the oak murder weapon. It says incriminating physical evidence, including impressions of the bite mark wound Bundy had inflicted on Lisa Levy's left buttocks. Forensic orthodontist Richard Sullivan and Lowell Levine matched castings of his teeth, Ted Bundy's teeth, to that of the bite mark. The jury deliberated for less than 7 hours before convicting him on June 24th, 1979, of the Bowman and Levy murders, 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder for the assault on Kleiner, Chandler, and Thomas, and 2 counts of burglary. The trial judge, Edward Cowart, imposed the death sentence for the murder conviction. 6 months later, a trial took place in Orlando for the abductions and murders of Kimberly Leach. Bundy was found guilty once again, and after less than 8 hours of deliberation, due to the principal testimony of an eyewitness who saw him leading Leach from the schoolyard to his stolen van, important material evidence including fibers and unusual manufacturer error found in the van on Leach's body were matching fibers from the jacket and Bundy was wearing, and he was arrested. During the penalty phase of the trial, Ted took advantage of the obscure Florida law providing a marriage declaration in court. So in the presence of a judge, he was legally married to Carol Ann Boone, who had moved to Florida to be near Bundy, testifying on his behalf during both trials, and was again testifying on his behalf as a character witness. Yeah, it's crazy.
I don't think I ever knew that. That's fucked up.
Yeah, he asked her to marry him, and she accepted. Bundy declared to the court that they were legally married. On February 10th, 1980, he was sentenced for a 3rd time to death by electrocution. As sentenced and announced, he reportedly stood and shouted, "Tell the jury they were wrong." Well, they weren't. This 3rd death sentence would be the one ultimately carried out by 9 years. In 81, Boone gave birth to their daughter, named Bundy, as the father. Conjugal visits, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think I ever knew that.
Yep, conjugal visits were allowed at Rayford Prison. Inmates were known to pull their money in order to bribe guards to allow their one-on-one time with their female visitors. Shortly after the confessions, Bundy initiated a series of interviews and I mean, it's just, it goes on and on. For time's sake, just know there's a lot. The stigma of confessions, he began for the first time to divulge the details of his crime through the process. He recounted his career as a thief. He confirmed Kelfner's longtime suspicion that he had shoplifted virtually everything of substance that he owned. The big payoff for me, he said, was actually possessing whatever it is I wanted, I had stolen. I really enjoyed having something that I wanted and gone out and taken it. That's fucked up. At first, he killed his victims as a matter of expediency to eliminate the possibility of being caught, but later murder became part of the adventure. The ultimate possession was, in fact, the taking of the life and then the physical possession of the remains. Bundy also confined in Special Agent William Hangmeyer, the FBI Behavioral Analysis Units. He said he was struck by the deep, almost magical satisfaction that Bundy took in murder. He said that after a while, murder is not just a crime of lust or violence, it becomes a passion. There are they are a part of you. The victim becomes a part of you, and you two are forever one, and the grounds where you kill them or leave them become sacred, and you will always be drawn back to them. Bundy told Hagmeyer that he considered himself to be an amateur and an impulse killer in his early years before moving to what he termed as his prime or predator phase about the time of Lydia Healy's murder in 74. This implied that he began killing well before 1974, although it was never explicitly admitted or done so. So, like we know, he's like in jail, blah, blah, blah. He's going on and doing all these interviews to try to gain notoriety and clout, for better explanation. Less than 15 hours before his scheduled July 2nd execution, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals stayed. It identified the remains of Chi Omega case for review on multiple technicalities, including Bundy's mental capacity to stand trial and the enormous instruction by the trial judge during the penalty phase requiring the judge to break a 6-6 tie between life imprisonment and death penalty, which ultimately was never resolved. The new date became November 18th. And then on November 17th, they had another kerfuffle. And within hours of the final date, which became January 24th of 1989, Bundy's journey through the appeals court had been unusually rapid for a capital murder case. Contrary to popular belief, the courts moved Bundy as fast as they could. Even the prosecutors acknowledged that Bundy's lawyers never employed delaying tactics, though people everywhere seethed at the apparent delay in execution. Ted Bundy was actually on the fast track. With all appeal adventures exhausted, with no further motivation to deny his crimes, Bundy agreed to speak frankly to investigators. He confessed to Keppel that he had committed all 8 of the Washington and Oregon homicides for which he was the prime suspect. He described 3 additional previously unknown victims in the Washington and 2 in Oregon, whom he declined to identify, if indeed he ever knew their identities to begin with. He said he left a 5th corpse, Donna Masson's, on Taylor Mountain, but incinerated her body in Keffler's fireplace. Of all the things I did to Keffler, he told Keppel, this is probably one of the least likely to be forgiven. Poor Liz. He described the Issaquah crime scene where the bones of Ott and Nosled and Hawkins were found, and he said to Keppel, like he was seeing everything, he was infatuated with the idea because he spent so much time there. He is just totally consumed with murder all the time. Nelson's impressions were similar. He said that the absolute misogyny of his crimes stunned me, she wrote. His manifested rage against women, he had no compassion at all. He was totally engrossed in the detail, and his murders were his life's accomplishments. Bundy confessed to detectives from Idaho, Utah, and Colorado that he committed numerous additional homicides, including several that were unknown to the police. He explained that when he was in Utah, he could bring his victims back to his apartment where he could reenact scenarios depicted on the covers of detective magazines. There are other buried remains in Colorado, he admitted. Ted's bones for time schemes severed only to deepen the resolve for the authorities to see him executed on schedule. He did give details, but nothing was found on certain things that he divulged. When it became clear that no further stays would be forthcoming from the court, Bundy supporters began lobbying for the only remaining option of execution, which would be clemency. That was obviously denied. And the families, Diana Weiner, a young Florida attorney and Bundy's last reported love interest, asked the families of several Colorado and Utah victims to petition Florida Governor Bob Martinez for a postponement to give Bundy time to reveal more information. They all refused. The families have already believed that the victims were dead and that Ted had killed them, Nelson wrote. They didn't need his confession. Martinez made it clear that he would agree to no further case delays and that they were not going to manipulate the system any further. For to be negotiating for his life to be over the bodies of victims is despicable. So they tried and tried and tried, and nobody could get a stay of execution. So Bundy was executed in the Railford electric chair at 7 o'clock, and he was pronounced dead at 7:16-ish on January 24th of 1989. His last words were, "Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends," referring to his attorney, Jim Coleman, and Methodist minister, Fred Lawrence. Hundreds of revelers sang, danced, and set off fireworks in a pasture across from the prison as his execution was carried out. Then they cheered as a white hearse containing Bundy's corpse departed the prison. He was cremated in Gainesville, and his ashes were scattered at an undisclosed location in the Cascade Range of Washington State in accordance with his will. And that is the awful case of Ted Bundy, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry that was so fucking lengthy, but God, he is a monster.
Wait. About 12 hours later, and you were born.
And then about 12 hours later, I was born. So there's that. But yeah, so that's how me and Ted Bundy have a weird correlation in life. He was executed a few hours before I was actually born. So there's
Like I said, the universe decided it needed something to make up for him.
Right. I'm just saying, like, I tried to give as much detail as possible, but there are people who do entire series of podcasts, like seasons dedicated to one thing, and that is Ted Bundy. So I feel like I didn't do it justice, and I feel bad for that.
I don't think anybody needs to do Ted Bundy justice. I know what you mean.
But
I know what you mean. I know you mean the topic.
Yeah, but for his victims, I feel like I didn't go into enough detail. But I also don't. I mean, there's not enough time to give. God, however many people he murdered, a
Right.
platform. Like I said, some people do entire podcasts just based around Ted Bundy.
I will say, because obviously I'm not covering a separate topic today, I will say in regards to his victims, Kathy Kleiner just tweeted the other day. I saw Sarah Turney retweeted it, and she tweeted on the 44th anniversary of the attack of the Chi Omega home that she took a book deal, can't remember with what publishing house, for a memoir called A Light in the Dark, Surviving More Than Ted Bundy. So that's exciting.
Oh, that sounds very interesting.
That puts
Yeah,
puts
for
some
her, that's very
good light
exciting.
on put some good light on somebody that he harmed versus his punk ass.
Absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, guys, that's the correlation of my birthday and Ted Bundy's execution and our case for this week. And unless Lindsay has something else to add.
I don't really have anything else to add. We're about at our time limit. Other than, of course, happy birthday. And I will say, one, for our listeners, you're looking out on our social media for something coming out on our next episode. It's going to be big. GABB podcast everywhere. And
Absolutely.
2, stick around after the show for a special surprise. And that goes for you too, Anna.
Ooh, I'm excited. But yeah, like I just want to touch one more time. Zac Efron is hot. Ted Bundy is not.
Oh, I could
Zac
go on
Efron
forever, and one
is
day I
an
will.
he's an excellent actor, but they picked somebody so fascinatingly gorgeous who happens to be talented to play somebody that is described as being charismatic and charming and sexy. Fuck that. He's not sexy. I don't care how many fucking fangirls he had. Ugh.
It's
We
a whole
don't
thing.
romanticize killers on this show.
Exactly. And like one day I am going to do like a whole episode talking about the sensationalism of true crime, the romanticization of it, and ethics in true crime.
Absolutely.
That's a big topic. But in general, Ted Bundy and every other serial killer and murderer and rapist and any other type of criminal, pieces of shit, period.
Oh, and by the way, if you go on the stand and defend somebody that you know is guilty, you're just as horrible as they are. So there's that.
Mhm.
And on that depressing note, happy birthday to me. And our 1 year anniversary, we have something big planned and we're trying to get it all organized. So stay tuned for St. Patrick's Day. We plan to release something epic for you guys. And our next episode will come out on February 4th, I believe.
Mhm.
And that's going to be pretty fucking epic too. If you haven't noticed increase in the epicness lately, it's pretty great. So stay tuned for more wild rides and true crimes and spooky tours of the unknown. And with that, we say, till next time, stay spooky, listeners. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, this is Stefan.
And this is Josh,
co-hosts of Fearscape Paranormal, as well as producers of the Fearscape Media Network. We just wanted to take an opportunity to wish a very, very happy birthday to one of our favorite hosts of all time, Anna from Ghosts in the Attic, Bodies in the Basement. Happy birthday.
happy birthday.
Yes. Happy birthday, Anna. We love you guys so much. But since it's your day, we love you the most.
Yeah.
Happy birthday from the spookiest dudes you know. And I guess we'll see you on the next year.
I want to wish a very happy birthday to one half of my favorite podcast team, Anna. I hope you have a great birthday and you deserve the best. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Anna, from Dustin and Kelsey in Texas.
Happy birthday, Anna. Very grateful to know you, and even more grateful to count you as one of my bonus daughters. Hope you have a great day.
Happy birthday, Anna. I'm so grateful for you and so happy that my sister has you as such a good best friend. My family loves you so much, and you are amazing and beautiful, and I hope you have a great birthday.
Happy birthday.
Anna, just want to tell you, hope you have a great birthday. Happy birthday.
What's up, serial killer? Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, dear April. Happy birthday to
Me and Gentry love you and hope you have the best day ever. Get to relax.
I just want to say happy birthday to my very best friend. Anna, I have known you since we were 15, and you have been there for me ways than one. This past year has been really hard, and you don't deserve any of it. But this year, I hope that we can all start looking up again, starting with your birthday. Misty, in the wide world, I love you so much. You are a great friend and a great person. And I hope that your birthday is full of everything you ever dreamed of. Happy birthday, sister. Love you.
Happy birthday, Anna. I'm so impressed with everything you've accomplished the past year, with work, the podcast, writing, just everything. Even with how difficult this year has been, you've been so resilient and strong and amazing. I wish you the best birthday, and just keep being the awesome person that you are. Love you.
And I wasn't kidding earlier when I said that I'll never be able to top you surprising me on my birthday last year. You saw me desperately wanting something without the guest list available. And the fact that you drove all the way here and surprised me like that just shows what an amazing, caring person you are. I wish more than anything I could hop in my car this weekend and pay that back to you. Now I'm kind of stuck in my town, so instead I gathered these little clips from some people who care deeply about you. Listeners, our amazing network family, loved ones, all to declare in front of all of our listeners across 41 states in the US and the 20 countries all over the world how much we love you. Last year has been beyond difficult for all of us, and I think everyone who's listened for a while would agree that you have been through more than anyone should. While 2021 was utter shit, good things came out of it, and I truly believe that this podcast was probably one of the best things that could have possibly come out of any year, especially 2021. I know that I joke a lot about how you're the one who wanted a podcast and you talked me into it. But I truly love this podcast and this little community we're growing from it, our network and our listeners and everything. And more importantly, I love that I get to just talk to you. I'm glad to have you as a co-host and my very best friend, soul sister, and extension of myself. I hope you have the happiest of birthdays. You deserve the best. All right, listeners, thanks for sticking around for that special surprise for Anna. Wish her a happy birthday at all of our socials. GABB podcast on everything. And since we forgot to mention in the show, we have a new merch store. The link is in the show notes, so make sure you go check that out. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Ghosts in the Attics, Bodies in the Basement, a Fearscape Media podcast. Music by Stephen Timperley. Artwork by Laura Ramsey. Find us online at fearscapemedia.com/GABB podcast or on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at GABB podcast or email us gabbpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you.